Okay, I think we're going to get started. Thank you all for joining. Looks like my timer's going. My name is Avi Badwal, and I'm the Senior Director of Enterprise Technologies at the University of San Diego in San Diego, California. Manage a lot of enterprise technologies. I help the organization look forward. We're heavily centralized, so we maintain a lot of systems: HR, finance, student information system, Salesforce, CRM, third-party solutions as well, small, large. Some people want our help, some people don't, but we're there if they do. You can find me on LinkedIn. That's where I do most of my postings. A little bit on Twitter. Forward-looking statement. So we're talking about education in 2022, so that's relatively forward-looking. One of the things I wanted to point out here in this presentation is the views and what I'm expressing isn't necessarily promoted by Salesforce or my employer, as a matter of fact. It's just where I see from my seat within the organization and where I see industry, where I see just everything heading to. So you might agree, you might disagree, you might not like it. Other people might like it. It's just what I see education in 2022. With that said, why am I talking about education in 2022? Roughly 5 years. We're not really talking about 10 years. 10 years, there's a lot of stuff rapidly changing. So 5 years is kind of a good amount for what's happening now to somewhat materialize in 5 years. There's enough shift and momentum to see kind of like the ideas that are brewing now to kind of come forward as well. Another thing is 2022 is that if you're thinking about doing something now, you might get different ideas after this presentation as well. With a quick show of hands, how many of you are in technology? Excellent. And then other of you are super users or business users? Correct? Okay. I'm going to try to do a balance between tech and kind of non-tech. To really be a super user, you kind of need to understand technology to a certain degree. So kind of moving forward, really, when I take a look at ed tech, it's really in kind of three spaces. It's this notion of infrastructure, student life, and then teaching and learning. In my realm, these are kind of three separate areas, and so that's where I'm kind of going to try to focus on. With that said, to think about the future, you kind of have to go to the future. So why don't we do that? Let me take my watch and let's program to go to the future. We're going to get our flux capacitor. There you go. It's going, and travel is complete. So you can tell none of you really, nothing changed, right? You're still sitting in your seat. You're not spaced out. Mostly that's what it's going to be. It's going to be a lot more of the same in the future. So, but with that said, as Doc would say, please don't, right, send emails, take pictures, or you might change the space-time continuum, and some of us might cease to exist. With that said, feel free. So we're going to start with infrastructure. For those of you, infrastructure is really as a service. We kind of hear this a lot. So in 5 years, it's going to be a lot further. So most organizations, if you're thinking through this, might not start to license physical hardware anymore. You'll start to use AWS more, Azure, or even Google's cloud products. This is going to infrastructure as a service is really this notion of licensing CPUs, licensing storage, and then running whatever set application or business process on these external services in the public cloud. Platform as a service, it's much like what Salesforce is. You can use kind of their platform, so you're not really licensing servers, you're not licensing CPUs, you're not licensing storage. All of that is already kind of taken care of. So you're just kind of licensing the platform. All you're really doing is, for example, paying for paid users or concurrent users, and you're running your applications and/or SaaS services. Software as a service. So you're in this conference, you're probably hearing the term force.com, or you're hearing a lot that you can do anything and everything on Salesforce. So that's kind of the platform side of it, right? That's really, you can kind of build your objects, you can create custom fields, and then they have kind of the software as a service play as well, right? Like desk.com, the marketing cloud, and so that's the software as a service. There's other organizations that don't give you that much access. They don't give you access to the software and the platform, but Salesforce does both. Function as a service. This is also kind of serverless computing. It takes it kind of one step further from infrastructure as a service or software as a service or platform as a service. It's really storing data, and then when you need to do something with the data, you just call a function, something like Lambda. I think Google has their own version of Lambda as well. So, and you're really counting it, so how you're actually ultimately charged is how long that actually function takes to run. So if your said business process takes up a minute of CPU cycle, they're going to charge you for that minute. So you're not really paying for a core of CPU that's just sitting around not doing much. You're really paying for how long that function actually takes. So how much of the real CPU you're actually taking up. Multi-tenancy is another thing that's going to become really big. And this is the notion of, so Salesforce is a multi-tenancy application. It's the notion of kind of taking this hotel example. It's your data and and every piece of the application is all, for example, on a single version. And versus kind of like just a hotel room. And so it's a hotel kind of versus a single family residence. So for example, there's software out there that's deployed for, if you're still on Banner, your SIS or PeopleSoft, every organization has its own version of Banner or PeopleSoft, right? So when you need to upgrade, you don't know what the other organization doing, so you're talking to them, you're like, well, we're doing this and this and this, and they're like, well, we're not, we didn't even know that existed. That simply might be because they're on different versions of the application. So they might not have that data set because it's just not built out. For example, there's organizations like Salesforce that are on a multi-tenant database or multi-tenancy. It's a software as the data and the application are all in a single version for all of the customers. Workday is another example of a multi-tenant database or multi-tenant application. And these ones ultimately allow to have that conversation. It's like, we're doing this and this and this, and you're like, that's really cool, we should do that as well. And you don't tend to get into those conversations like, oh, we need to upgrade, or we need to do something else. You can just start doing it just because you're on the same version of everything. Application programming interfaces, these are going to become more well known. APIs are a very important aspect in today's world. It's what allows software like Kayak to run successfully. And so it's the ability to see published APIs by your vendor and figure out how to call them, much like in the old terms, there used to be these interface tables. It's kind of like that, but it's well more documented, and you can call it via an API key, so you can start to program and start to consume different applications and different data elements to do whatever you need to do. Web services, this is also obviously really big right now, but it's going to become a lot more prevalent in 5 years, and that's the ability to consume information from one system to another system. You don't need to necessarily suck that data out of a system, put it in another system. So for example, in some cases you're pulling information out of your student information system, putting it into a flat file, and then you're taking that flat file and you're moving that flat file to Salesforce, into your housing system, into another third-party application. If it's a career services application, you might be moving that file into Handshake or Simplicity. With web services, you don't actually have to do that. You publish your APIs, and so you consume them. So they call when they need, who are all your current students, they're going to make that call, and they're going to get that information in real time. So there's no reason for you to be pushing and pulling. The reason why this is these 7, 8 concepts are really important is because they help you understand your corpus of information, where your corpus of information lies. So where does your housing information lie? What's really important? There are certain pieces of information that are important in every system. So for example, in housing, that's what room they stay in, probably how much they paid, what are their roommates, and what floor they're on, and what building they're at, what building on campus they're staying at. If it's the campus card dining solution, that the corpus information that's really important in that application is what's your dining dollar balances, what type of purchases are you doing, right? Let's see, how much campus cash you have, how much dining dollars you have. So when you start to take a look at all of these systems, you start to build this corpus of information, and from there you can start to do really change the student life or change that student experience. And you can't really do that until you have this complete understanding. Well, you can start to do it in kind of fragmentation, but it really takes understanding of how these technologies come together to then change the student life experience. Some of that is being abstracted out with HEDA. Some of you might be using HEDA, so it's not as important to understand all of that information that we just talked about in the previous slides, but kind of HEDA takes all that information, dumps it in a single data layer. But it's still important to understand kind of, because some of this stuff is date driven. Some companies who are traditional, not in the cloud, not SaaS-based, have different ways of working, and all you can really get out of that system is a flat file. So all of that stuff is still really, really important. When we talk about student life, so it's about taking this information, figuring out how it's really important, and figuring out how it's important to that individual student, right? We in education have roughly 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 applications that are doing random bits of some sort of processing, whether it's financial aid, whether it's admissions, whether it's in Salesforce. They're just applications, whether it's you're getting email alerts for something using Pardot. All of that information sits in a application, and kind of figuring out that corpus of knowledge and then how it ultimately can affect that student life experience. And with that, you can ultimately change, and in this first notion is you can give a more personalized student experience. So that essentially means is you've probably heard of a personalized learning experience. That's so if you're really good in algebra, a certain part of algebra, the software knows or the teacher knows, and they start to basically help you kind of figure out what your weak points are, and that personalized learning experience will adapt according to you. Well, you can start to change and affect a personalized student experience as well. So that might look like if you are attending, for example, a lot of sustainability events, an algorithm can be written to kind of tell you what you should attend. It might tell you that it's already registered, and if you're an undergraduate, you can kind of create a pointing system and let students know that this is how many points you have, and you can gain that much more points. If you're constantly going to a cafe on campus, you can favorite that cafe, and so you can pick that information from your merchant accounting system, right? So if you're constantly swiping your card in the dining halls, and if you're constantly swiping in the dining halls as well as you're constantly going to, for example, the sushi bar, we can take that information and take the cadence of that information and start to abstract it to give a personalized student experience. And so here, we built this native application that tells students what's closed and what's not closed. And when it's open, it'll actually say that it's open. When it's closed, it'll say that it's closed. And when it's about to close, you probably experience this on Google, right? When you punch up Google. So we've replicated that with the behind-the-scenes application. So students no longer have to go to individual websites where it's sometimes posted and sometimes it's not posted. Or they don't have to go to a random PDF on your auxiliaries website. They can just come into a single application. You can also create a personalized experience by telling students that from your form of communication. So for example, you can send students an email when they've successfully are full-time. So they've taken 16 units. Instead of just doing nothing, you can take that information, you can shoot them off an email, and so you can personalize the experience that way as well. We'll show you some live demos from my phone as I kind of wrap up the student life section before we move on to the next section. You can also use nudging when you, so nudging is going to be really big in my opinion in 2022, in that you're trying to get people to, for example, do stuff, right? Just because you tell them they should do it or just because it's the right thing to do. These are freshmen coming in. Most of the stuff is figured out for them by their parents. So there's this notion of nudging. It's like softly telling someone that they should do something, and there's a great opportunity there as well. So with that, so what we did is, what this looks like is we nudge students by allowing them to set an alert on their phone saying class is going to start in, they can set 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes. And then so when that class is going to start, they get one of these buildings along with where that location is. And then so we change the image as well, so you can personalize it by changing the image. So when the class is in the morning, we show sunset over Mission Bay, for example. And when it's, so we kind of change the imagery based on what time of day it is. There's no really limit of what you can do from a creativity perspective. Here, so when class ends, that information, for example, is just, right, class starts, class ends. Right now, it's really kind of dead information in the sense that it's not really being used for anything right now, other than the fact that it's telling students that they have class from 2:30 to 3:30, right? So what can we do with that real end time of 3:30? How can you take that information and nudge someone to actually do something? Having gone to school for a relatively long period of time, sometimes faculty members read chapters 3 to 4 really late, right as you're walking in, you're like, seriously, like I've already put everything away. So what I'm gonna do as a student, I'm just gonna remember that I'm supposed to read chapters 3 to 6, and that we're gonna have some sort of quiz on that chapter, right? Here, what we do is we take that end time and we essentially add 5 minutes to it. So at 3:35, we send a student a push notification. They're gonna get a push saying, hey, do you wanna add anything? And so they can add something, and then it goes into their to-do list. So we're taking that end time and we're adding a little nudge component by saying, hey, class just ended, why don't you add whatever you're supposed to do to your to-do list? Here, in this application that we build, it's called My Office Hours. And so what you'll see is this faculty member, this is just false data, but this faculty member has these many hours, and this faculty member has not listed their hours. As we know, you can tell faculty members, so hopefully there's not any faculty members here, you can tell them until you're blue or green to do something, and they won't, right? So how do we nudge faculty members, right? You can nudge a lot of people. How do you nudge your career services department or your auxiliary department to use certain software solutions? And so what we're doing is we're experimenting with social engineering, and that term is normally used in a negative connotation around phishing scams and stuff like that, but Facebook uses social engineering to kind of get people to use their applications more. That's why if you don't use Facebook for a week, they're going to send you like so-and-so, posted this image, and they're going to send you an email. They're nudging you to go click on that, and that opens Facebook, for example. So we're taking that same methodology and the research behind it, and what we're doing is once a student hits, there's going to be a little drawer right here. It's not on this image with 3 little dots. They can dislike it. They can dislike the fact that the faculty member does not have office hours. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take those dislikes and then we're going to send a faculty member an email saying 15 students dislike the fact that you don't have office hours. And here's a link to set up your office hours. It's not telling them it's not going to the provost and telling them, hey, provost, can you email all the faculty members? And all right, so their role in the organization is to kind of handle all of that stuff. And what we know, they're really busy, and what we know, sometimes even though they're supposed to be able to control the faculty members, a lot of times they can't, right? You can like stuff. So if you have, if enough students like your office hours, we'll tell the faculty member this many students liked your office hours. Of course, we're not going to email them all the time because it just doesn't make sense. They don't want any, every time someone likes their office hours, dislikes their office hours, we're not going to email them. And so we're going to let them set preferences as well. If they don't want emails, we're going to allow them to see it in their student portal, or we'll figure out something else out as well. Here you can nudge students to buy their books. So if they purchased all of the required books, we're going to send them an image saying, congratulations, you purchased all of the required books. And so you kind of conquered the little mountain of kind of book purchasing. You can start to do that. You can start to nudge people. It's not just about nudging negative things. It's about positive rewards as well, right? So that is something, if you're using the Marketing Cloud, you can start to take a look at the data. Once again, first you have to know where the data sits, what kind of application, use APIs, and that's why understanding your infrastructure is really important to this personalized student experience that you're going to start to see by 2022. Ambient. Technology is going to be a lot more ambient in 5 years. We'll get a little bit about what that means, but it essentially is technology that's just kind of quietly there. It just kind of comes into play when you need it. And a primary example of ambient technology is if you have those sensors when you walk into a classroom, kind of the lights turn on. That's a great example of ambient technology. Another great example of ambient technology is like an Amazon Echo. It's not really doing much. It's not talking to you. Only when you say, Alexa, ask blah blah blah, does it actually then respond, right? Hey Siri is the same way. So what might that look like? 8 a.m. they're using their phone. So they can kind of go throughout their day, just depending on how you've kind of controlled the tech and what solutions that you've used. But there's a lot of opportunity to constantly engage them in different forms of your organization. Once again, all this depends on how you use your infrastructure. Analytical. And I don't have my Amazon Echo, otherwise I would have been able to show you what that looks like. We built an Amazon Echo app as well. Data-driven, right, you've heard of Wave Analytics, there's Cognos, there's a number of different BI solutions, Tableau. What we decided to do was something very different in the sense that there's a lot of data that we have on individuals, right? Whether it's real-time data, whether it's siloed data, whether the data sits in the SIS or whatever system it is, it really doesn't matter. We just have a lot of it, and so currently, what most organizations do is they take that data and give it to an advisor, or they take the data and they give it to some administrator across campus, and then that tries to set up a meeting with the student, and then hopefully they get them, and sometimes they won't. And if the student is cool enough, he's not really listening to the administrator anyways because they just feel like they know what they're doing, right? So what we did is we decided to do something a little bit different. Instead of just taking that data set and trying to empower administrators with it, we took all of these data sets and we're empowering students directly with that information. Think about what Mint did for personal finance. You're spending your money in these categories, so you're successful, right? Not telling them that they're successful, we're just floating up the data, so we're not giving them insights, but they can kind of curate those insights themselves right now. So when you take classes Mondays and Wednesdays, you're at a 3.67. When you take classes that are on Fridays, your GPA for those days are 1.33. Obviously, the student shouldn't take classes on Fridays if this was real data. Showing them their GPA chart over time, so if you see something that's like really bad, right? So the student in spring of 08, something really bad happened. And so you can start to visualize it. You can also obviously drive that in email communication, but it's really, really personalized. No one's giving this information to students. The student has it as a self-service option. He's gonna make us disappear sorry, it's the, as well, so in another application that we built, we've taken the data sets about what they're successful and what they're not, and kind of really, this is a to-do list application that we built called Insight, and what this does is it allows students to add tasks. All of this stuff is really dynamic. It's not powered by Blackboard or the LMS or the faculty member. It's really for the student, for themselves. All of this stuff is pre-configured because we know how data sits in Banner or SIS. And so when they log in, they see all of these categories for their classes. So they're going to add a task, and they're going to start to time it. And so what we do is with the number of tasks, how long that they're spending on each task, we take all of that information, we float it up here saying you spent 6 hours on this class studying for the whole semester. And then what we'll do is, so here we're showing a reflection of the unit of work towards that class as a relation to your final grade automatically, because we know what your final grade is. So we're taking different elements of your SIS, we're taking different elements and kind of really collaborating them all together. This application also allows you to define your personal state of mind as you're completing tasks. And so it'll tell you that a lot of your, when you're really sad, you tend to do a lot worse. So you can take that emotional data as well, and you can start to tell students, well, you seem to be really upset every time you have math classes because at an individual unit, at an individual task level, right? Why are you a math major? Of course, maybe their parents want them to be pre-med, and they can't change that fact, but at least we can start to give them a more personalized student experience. Natural language processing, and we talked about this in a previous slide. We built out an application for the Amazon Echo currently because they're the only open natural language processing framework. The Google Home is still closed. Siri is still closed for certain domains. But you can start to ask questions like, Alexa, ask USD what athletic events are happening today. Or you can ask it, give me the hours for aromas. So once again, we took that information that we had in that we powered the little star. We took that same information because we built it, we understand it. Now we're providing it over a different medium, and that's a natural language processing. I think it's important to say that right now, obviously, the app doesn't have a lot of use, but understanding the information that you have, understanding the relationships, understanding how to get it out of that system in real time, APIs and web services, allows you to create experiences like this. I can't imagine in the next 5 years, at least by 2022, a lot of students are going to be having these Amazon Echoes in their dorm rooms. But I do envision the student's mom will have the Amazon Echo in the living room, and while they're cooking, they can say, Alexa, ask USD what's happening on campus today. And if they're having a text-based communication with their student, and the student's saying, I'm really sad, I miss home, or I miss your cooking, instead of the mom looking at your website or trying to download your mobile app, we'll just say, Alexa, ask USD what's happening on campus today, and then translate that information to their son or daughter. It's also the only platform, in my opinion, that's going to excel in this form of the relationship to the organization. That entity is based on the individual and not the other way around. So for example, if you're an alumni, if you're a student, if you're a prospective student, if you're a current student, it doesn't matter, right? The Amazon Echo doesn't care. It's not going to show you a different screen because you're an alumni. It's not going to show you a different screen because you're a prospective student. That relationship is based on your questions to the device, right? Alexa, ask USD when the deadline for admissions is, right? Your admissions application. Versus Alexa, ask USD how the school can help me that I've graduated 10 years ago, right? You're not going to show them a different screen. That natural language processing is solely based on your communication back to that device and whether or not you've programmed that intent into these applications. Another thing is user-centric. That still seems to be a challenge in most of higher ed, even with some of the ed tech startups, which amazes me. So we built out an application called Insight, as I said before. It's really, really heavily user-centric. You can see it's very, very colorful. It's very easy to put data in. It automatically consumes information from Salesforce, from the SIS. It consumes information from Google. It consumes information from the Nebraska Book Company and a number of other applications, all to give a single user experience that's heavily, heavily user-centric. And so what that might look like is, I'm hungry, so this is a chat application. I'm hungry, what's still open? And so you really have to figure out how students communicate to be able to share the information that you want to share with them. Currently, that's being done over surveys, or it's really a one-sided, it's a one-sided communication, where it's like, hey, let me survey the students to ask them where they're working. Students can actually just open up a chat application. It's going to say, how's it going? It's going to say, you have a class today at 2. And they're going to be like, thanks, that's great, I already knew that. Then it's going to say, did you know that the application for something blah, blah, blah is due for financial aid? They may be like, no. Do you want to learn more? Yes, right? So you can start to take a different approach to the information that you actually need from them. Ubiquitous. There's a lot of devices these days, right? So it's really ubiquitous. No matter what device that individual wants to use, whether they're using a Chromebook or a MacBook or a desktop or an Amazon Echo, Google Home, iPad, watch, iPhone, Android phone, these experiences are really ubiquitous. So the technology's there. It's just a matter of, are you willing to basically take a look at all of your data, all of your infrastructure, and create it more of like a web services so they can consume it on their terms, not necessarily on the organization's terms. So we currently have obviously solutions for the iPhone and the Android phone, the Amazon Echo, the iPad. We're taking, obviously we have a student portal and just websites obviously work on all of these devices. But we're allowing the students to dictate whatever experience that they want. It's whatever device that they want as well. And then that takes me to teaching and learning, just kind of figuring out how we're doing on time, so 7 minutes. Teaching and learning. So teaching and learning, in my opinion, is going to change quite drastically as well. We're going to be in more of a mixed reality world in about 5 years. And so what that might look like is you might see this like little tutor come up that's kind of helping you to learn math. Right now, that's you would have to go find that tutor. We also might see a situation where they're putting on these glasses and that experience is much more immersive. It's not putting like covering their head or anything. There's technology being worked on that would allow to basically put on sunglasses like the Snapchat spectacles and then see this immersive experience. In a matter of fact, this particular company where I took these videos from is funded at roughly $1.5 billion and has not released a single product. Artificial intelligence, that's going to be a big thing, and it is, right? Currently, you can do image analysis. You'll see some of that, the social networks doing some of that already. You can essentially take a web services call, allow students to take a picture with their phone, and so you want them to save it as a student profile, or you want that image, because the line gets really, really backed up during when freshmen first come in, especially if you have 10,000 students coming into the campus as freshmen, or even 2,000. The human capital just can't process these students fast enough, and it's relatively risky to allow them to upload an image and just take their word for it, right? Image analysis is a great use case for artificial intelligence. Speech recognition is a great version of artificial intelligence. Text analysis, this is probably a really big one, right? You want students to be able to interact with a lot of the information that you have, but you're worried because you don't know what they're going to say. So then you get into the situation of, well, who's going to moderate all of the interactions that they're kind of, right, whether they're ranting or whether they're saying they like something. You want to allow them to collaborate, but you as an organization don't want negative sentiment, negative feedback on like other stuff where other people can actually see it. So you can, for example, now you'll be able to call an API that essentially takes a look at whether or not this person's post was negative or not, and then automatically delete it, or you can now send it over to a real human to take a look at, do you want this post to actually allow to exist? Machine learning in higher ed, I think there's a great opportunity. We're just kind of really touching the surface of what's possible with artificial intelligence. And particularly when you look at artificial intelligence and you start kind of breaking down the different areas, machine learning is a big one. So machine learning in higher ed, right now, it's a relatively big challenge. Everything is kind of tutor-based. There's a lot of opportunities to essentially feed a book that's adopted, right? To an algorithm, and a faculty member says, tonight's homework is, right, chapters 2 and 3, and then you're gonna have a test in 1 week about that material, and you as a student continue to read it, so that business process isn't changed, right? What's really gonna change is you're not gonna make flashcards anymore. You're gonna say, Alexa, ask me a question from chapter 2, right? So you're gonna use natural language processing. Alexa's going to know what book it's talking about because it knows what book was adopted. And then so it's going to say, no, I feel you don't understand this information right now. My recommendation is go back and study a little bit further. Robotics is going to be a really big one as well in 5 years. Some of this stuff is already being deployed. It's already in Japan on an everyday basis. It's helping with customer service. It's helping in some places in the United States as well. Teaching and learning is a big opportunity as well. Now you're not really talking to an ambient technology like Hey Siri. You really have this little robot who's kind of helping you out. It sounds a little creepy right now, but it's gonna somewhat start to materialize in 5 years, and at some point it's gonna be ubiquitous as well, just like everything else. So let's take a look at a little video. Can I get some volume? I guess volume's not working. Yeah. Anyways, you can live without the volume. There it goes.
Say hello to Pepper. Pepper is high-tech, low-maintenance, and not your typical robot. Pepper's not here to replace humans or even vacuum the floor. Pepper is here to make people happy, help them grow, and enhance their lives. Think of it as high-tech. You can high-five.
Awesome.
Pepper can be incredibly helpful interacting with customers and solving problems, or providing information.
Once again, all this goes back to make that possible, this all goes back to the corpus of knowledge. You as an organization are not, because Pepper's around, you're not gonna change your SIS, right? You're not gonna change your student housing information. You're not going to change whether or not you're using Salesforce as a CRM. You're not going to change where you adopt your books, whether it's Hero or Nebraska Book Company or whatever Blackboard's selling these days, right? It's understanding what that infrastructure is, where that data sits, what data is important. So whether you as an organization give another company access to that data set so they can basically allow students to use Pepper, or whether you do that programming yourself, it all goes back to that corpus of knowledge. And so that corpus of knowledge, right, is really, really important. So, and it's really personalized. And so that goes back to your schedule, right? That goes back to what books you have for that class. That goes back to your homework assignments. That goes back to your social network, who your friends are. That goes back to your housing information. That corpus of knowledge goes back to what type of foods you're eating, what type of foods you like. So you have all of the information. Organizations in higher ed have always had all of the data, whether it's on paper, whether you've gone through a digital transformation. It's not that you haven't had the data. It's just, are you willing to basically take that data and allow for a more personalized student experience? In my opinion, I think it's coming right around the corner. Once again, so that's infrastructure, student life, teaching and learning in 2022. Now I don't have a way to take us back to, right, 2017, but we'll open it up for questions.
Question. So sorry about that. We're just about at time. So
although this room is open, so, and there's no session in here after.
There's not, but there's the keynote happening at 4 o'clock.
Any questions? I shared a lot. I know it's a little abstract too, but. Yes, there's a question.
I think your mic is not on. Sorry, can you turn the mic on?
Sure, I heard your question. So the question is, I mentioned an organization that has have $1.5 billion investment, and probably what's the company's name? Yeah, that company is called Magic Leap. Correct. That company is called Magic Leap, and it's out of Florida. And the CEO of Google is on their board as well. I'm guessing they're taking a lot of lessons learned from Google Glass, and those will be incorporated as well as all the other fancy stuff that they're doing. Any other questions? Obviously, the natural language processing stuff is with Google and Cortana, Microsoft, and Amazon, but all of this stuff is out there. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining.